All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Have you ever wondered why old buildings sometimes just feel off? Well, today we're uncovering a very real, completely invisible force that's secretly shaping your mood, spiking your stress levels, and making you feel totally on edge in certain places. We finally have the science to explain it.
You know, we've all had this experience at some point. You walk into a dark basement, an empty parking garage, or just a quiet room in an aging building, and suddenly, boom, you get hit with this inexplicable sense of dread. The hair on your arms stands up, you feel agitated, and you literally can't point to a single visible or audible reason why. Usually, we just chalk it up to a vivid imagination, maybe watching too much true crime, or even something supernatural. But today, we're definitively solving that mystery.
When you feel that sudden mood shift, your first instinct might be to assume the place is haunted, right? But a fascinating recent study published in Frontiers in Behavioral Neuroscience reveals a purely physical, scientifically measurable culprit. The thing is, just because you can't hear or see anything unusual doesn't mean your body isn't reacting to something very real that's right there in the room with you.
So, unmasking this so-called ghost, we find our culprit. It's called infrasound. Basically, this is an omnipresent, ultra-low frequency vibration that constantly exists in our environment. It's produced by natural events like severe storms or shifting weather patterns, but it's also heavily generated by human-made sources. Interestingly enough, some animals actually rely on infrasound to communicate over vast distances, while others instinctively flee from it. But for us humans, it acts as a completely silent stressor.
To put this into perspective, our biological limit for hearing typically bottoms out right around 20 Hz. That means any sound wave vibrating at a frequency lower than 20 times a second is entirely imperceptible to our ears. It is literally silent to us. But, and this is a big but, just because we lack the conscious ability to hear it doesn't mean our bodies aren't physically feeling the pressure of those sound waves crashing into us. So where is this coming from when you step into an old building? Well, think about aging water pipes vibrating in the walls, massive, rattling ventilation systems moving air through the basement, heavy street traffic rumbling outside, or nearby industrial equipment. All of these things are secretly pumping out hidden, low-frequency vibrations right under your nose. You're basically being bathed in acoustic energy without ever knowing it.
All right, moving on to Section 1, Testing the Unseen Force.
To see how this unseen force translates into actual scientific proof, researchers from MacEwan University and the University of Alberta set up a really clever, highly controlled experiment. They recruited 36 individuals and had them just sit alone in a room. Now, to mask the true purpose of the study and keep them occupied, they had them listen to either calming or unsettling music. Before and after the session, the researchers carefully tracked their physiological responses by collecting saliva samples and having them fill out emotional surveys.
Now here is where it gets really interesting. There was a hidden variable the participants had absolutely no clue about. The researchers split the subjects. Group A sat in the room and just listened to the music. Simple enough. But Group B, they had a totally different experience. Hidden subwoofers in their room were unknowingly blasting them with a continuous 18 Hz frequency. And remember, 18 Hz is below that 20 Hz threshold we just talked about. So, to the participants, it was completely silent.
Section 2, Felt but not heard. Let's look at the results.
The data they gathered from those saliva samples and mood surveys was incredibly telling. The physiological and emotional changes were clear as day. The participants who were secretly exposed to that silent 18 Hz infrasound exhibited significantly higher levels of cortisol. That's the primary stress hormone in your body. Furthermore, their mood surveys showed they felt noticeably more irritable, less engaged with their surroundings, and get this, they actually perceived the music they were listening to as sounding sadder than the control group did. The silent sound was literally altering their emotional reality.
And here's perhaps the craziest part of the entire study. The participants had absolutely no idea it was happening. When asked if they thought a low-frequency sound was playing, their guesses were essentially no better than a coin flip. Their conscious beliefs about whether the infrasound was turned on or off had zero correlation with their spiking cortisol levels or their irritability. Their bodies were reacting entirely on their own. As lead researcher and PhD student Cale Scatterty pointed out, increased irritability and higher cortisol usually go hand in hand, right? If something annoys you, your cortisol naturally goes up as part of your normal stress response. But the infrasound exposure had independent effects on both of these things. It was driving an unnatural, unconscious stress response deep within the body that entirely bypassed the brain's normal reasoning process.
You didn't even need to be consciously annoyed for your body to start panicking.
Which brings us to Section 3, the real-world impact and its long-term effects. So you might be asking, why does this matter outside of a highly controlled laboratory setting? Well, because we're living, working, and sleeping in environments constantly flooded with these silent waves. Professor Trevor Hambleton, one of the researchers, issues a stark warning here. Evolutionarily speaking, a quick spike in cortisol is a good thing. It induces vigilance, helps us survive immediate threats, you know the drill. But being constantly exposed to this hidden background noise in our daily environments, that keeps those cortisol levels artificially elevated. Over time, that prolonged stress response can lead to serious long-term physiological conditions and chronically alter your mental health, driving ongoing low mood and fatigue.
Now, this study was really just a first step, testing a single 18 Hz tone on 36 people. So the scientific community knows there's still a ton of work ahead. In the real world, infrasound is rarely just one clean frequency. It's usually a messy combination of different vibrations. The next step is exploring how these complex, overlapping frequencies impact our daily lives. And eventually, this could even lead to entirely new building design standards and urban noise regulations aimed at protecting our physical and mental health.
Finally, Section 4. Vibrating pipes, not spirits. The final takeaway.
Let's bring this all back full circle to that creepy, unsettling feeling in the dark basement we started with. Professor Rodney Schultz, who studies pseudoscience, perfectly sums it up. What really stands out here is that a completely invisible, completely silent source produces a highly measurable biological reaction. So the next time your heart starts racing and you feel a wave of dread in an old building, there's no need to call a ghost hunter. The dread you're feeling is very real, sure, but it's just your biology reacting to the deep, silent rumble of old architecture. And this leaves us with an incredibly fascinating and maybe slightly unsettling final thought to ponder as you go about your day. If our bodies are having strong, hormone-altering reactions to sounds we can't even consciously perceive, what else is our biology sensing right now that our conscious minds are completely blind to? Something to think about next time you walk into a seemingly quiet room. Thanks for learning with me today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.